To the Book Nook podcast. Today we're going to be diving deep into I May Be Wrong by Björn Natthiko Lindeblad.
Yeah,
It's a fascinating one.
It really has been resonating with a lot of readers, and I'm really excited to kind of unpack why.
I think what makes it so captivating is Björn himself, like when you think about it, he wasn't always a spiritual teacher, you know?
Right.
He had a whole life before becoming a forest monk, a successful business career.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing. And just imagine like making that leap,
Yeah.
from boardrooms to the serenity of a Thai forest.
Yeah. Okay, so let's unpack this whole forest monk life because it's so intriguing for a lot of us, I think. And reviewers seem to be really fascinated by all the details, the daily rituals and like the blend of religious practice with just like everyday community life.
Right.
And it's interesting because like depending on the monastery that he was living in, some really focused on meditation and others on craftsmanship, and like there's even some social work involved too.
So it paints such a vibrant picture of a life that I think a lot of us wouldn't even know existed.
It does make you wonder, like, what leads someone to make such a drastic change, though, right? Like, is it, everyone kind of seems to be yearning for that simpler life.
Yeah.
Stripped of all the noise and demand. It's like a yearning for stillness and a connection with something a bit deeper.
Right.
Than the everyday grind.
And it makes you think, what aspects of that life would we find appealing? It's the structured routine, the emphasis on mindfulness, or the sense of community.
Yeah.
What do you think was the biggest draw for him, knowing that he walked away from this very successful career?
Yeah, I think it was just the search for truth, like a desire to understand the human condition beyond just like the material world. But the thing is, his book isn't like a guide to becoming a monk or anything.
Yeah.
It's more of an exploration of what he learned on his path.
Yeah.
And it's wisdom that transcends any specific lifestyle.
Yeah. And reviewers are really raving about the impact of his wisdom, too. They're highlighting things like his advice on managing difficult emotions or finding stillness in the midst of chaos, accepting what we can't control, and practicing non-judgment. And these aren't just like these feel-good concepts either. Reviewers are sharing how they're like actively using these ideas in their everyday lives.
And that's what makes this book so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not theoretical. It's deeply practical. Like, for example, his advice on letting go of the small stuff.
Yeah.
It isn't about, decluttering your house. It's about recognizing what truly matters in life.
Yeah.
He talks about how in the monastery, even a simple task like sweeping could become a meditation, a way to practice presence and focus.
That's fascinating. It really shifts your perspective on all those everyday chores that we kind of rush through a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it brings us to one of the most intriguing parts of the book, I think. The title itself, I May Be Wrong. It's a phrase one of Björn's teachers used, and it's such a powerful tool for diffusing conflict and just fostering like open communication in general.
It's true. Imagine approaching disagreements with that kind of humility. Acknowledging that you might not have all the answers, it just disarms defensiveness and creates space for genuine understanding.
It's like a magic phrase to transform arguments into conversations.
Yeah.
Instead of digging in your heels, you're opening the door to collaboration. And I think that resonates with people because so many of us have been in those like heated situations where we wish we had remembered that mantra. Have you ever had a moment like that where that phrase could have changed the course of a conversation?
Oh, absolutely. I think we all have. It's a reminder that clinging to being right often comes at the expense of genuine connection.
Right.
And honestly, isn't connection what we're all truly seeking?
Yeah.
It's what makes life rich and meaningful.
Before we dive further into Björn's journey and the other powerful concepts that he explores, we wanted to take a quick moment to remind you to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast if you're enjoying this deep dive.
Yes, definitely.
And if you're feeling extra generous, leave a review.
Please do.
It helps us spread the love of reading. Now back to Björn.
Okay.
So one of the themes that really resonated with readers and with me personally was Björn's emphasis on self-compassion.
Yeah.
He talks about the importance of treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a good friend.
Right.
It's such a simple concept, but why is it so difficult for so many of us?
It is fascinating how often we become our own harshest critics, holding ourselves to these impossible standards.
Yeah.
But Björn challenges this tendency, reminding us that we're all worthy of warmth and acceptance,
Right.
regardless of our flaws or mistakes. He even asks this really poignant question: what does it take for us to feel we deserve human warmth from ourselves?
That quote really struck me.
Yeah.
It forces you to kind of examine your own internal dialogue and how often you're extending compassion to others but withholding it from yourself. Do you think this tendency comes from societal pressures Or is it more deeply rooted in like human nature?
I think it's a complex interplay of both. We live in a culture that often values achievement and perfectionism, which leads us to constantly compare ourselves to others.
Right.
But it's also true that the human mind has this negativity bias. We're wired to pay more attention to threats and shortcomings,
Yeah.
which can fuel self-criticism.
So how do we break free from these patterns and cultivate genuine self-compassion? Is it a matter of just like changing our thoughts, or is there like a deeper practice involved?
Well, it's a process, and it's not always easy, but Bjorn offers some beautiful insights in the book.
Yeah.
He talks about the importance of mindfulness, becoming aware of those negative thought patterns, but without judgment. And he encourages us to practice self-kindness,
Right.
offering ourselves words of encouragement and support, just as we would to a loved one.
And this kind of brings us to another significant part of Bjorn's story. His return to secular life after 17 years as a monk. Reviewers found this part of the book particularly poignant, especially considering the challenges that he faced upon reintegration.
It's a reminder that even after transformative experiences, returning to the familiar can be surprisingly difficult.
Right.
We might change, but the world around us often remains the same.
Yeah.
And for Bjorn, this reintegration was further complicated by his diagnosis with ALS shortly after returning to Sweden.
It's heartbreaking, but what's remarkable is how he faced this diagnosis with such grace and courage. He didn't let it define him. Instead, he used it as an opportunity to deepen his understanding of impermanence and to live each moment with greater intention.
Absolutely. He embraced the reality of his situation without succumbing to despair.
Yeah.
He even used this beautiful analogy. We are all like leaves on trees. Some wither and cling, while others fall while they're still green.
That's such a powerful image.
Yeah.
It speaks to the beauty of letting go, of accepting the natural cycles of life and death. And it ties back to his message of mindfulness, of appreciating each day as a precious gift.
Precisely. His story encourages us to ask ourselves, how would we live if we knew our time was limited?
Yeah.
Would we hold on to grudges? Would we waste time on things that don't truly matter?
These are big questions, and they're not always easy to answer,
Right.
but they're worth pondering.
Yeah.
And that's what makes I May Be Wrong such a valuable book. It's not a set of prescriptive answers.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to explore these essential questions of life and meaning.
And to do so with a sense of curiosity and open-mindedness. To remember that, as Bjorn so eloquently reminds us, we may be wrong.
I love that. Such a humbling and liberating thought. And it perfectly encapsulates the spirit of this book. If you're enjoying this exploration of Bjorn's journey and wisdom, we encourage you to check out I May Be Wrong for yourself. And while you're at it, subscribe to the Book Nook podcast for more deep dives into insightful reads like this one. Leave us a review, too, if you're feeling the bookish love. Now let's get back to the conversation about I May Be Wrong. It's amazing how Bjorn found peace even with his ALS diagnosis. It would be so easy to just fall into despair, but he seemed to approach it with acceptance and even curiosity.
It is remarkable. He didn't shy away from the difficult emotions, but he didn't let them consume him. There's this one passage where he talks about how he used to think of death as a wall, something to fear. But through his meditation practice, he came to see it more like a doorway, a transition into something unknown.
Wow, that's a powerful shift in perspective. Makes you think about how we often view these difficult experiences as obstacles instead of opportunities for growth.
Exactly. And Bjorn's story really encourages us to question our assumptions about what's good or bad. He found meaning in his life as a monk.
Right.
But he also found it in his final years, even as his body was failing.
It reminds me that meaning isn't something we find in our circumstances, it's something we create.
Right. And it's a process. It takes effort and attention. It's not about achieving some state of bliss,
Yeah.
It's about showing up for each moment with curiosity and compassion, even the difficult ones.
That really resonates with me. It's not about denying the pain or the challenges.
Yeah.
It's about learning to navigate them with grace and awareness.
And finding those moments of joy and beauty in the struggle, Bjorn's book is filled with them. A simple cup of tea with a friend, the sound of birds in the forest, feeling the sunlight on his skin.
Wow. It's a reminder to appreciate the small things, the everyday experiences we often take for granted.
And to be grateful for life itself, even with its imperfections.
Yeah, this has been such a thought-provoking conversation. What stands out to you most from Bjorn's story?
His invitation to approach life with humility, open-mindedness, self-compassion. Remembering that we're all on this journey together, learning as we go. And it's okay to not have the answers, to admit when we're wrong, and to treat each other with kindness.
That's beautiful. And if you're resonating with these ideas, we encourage you to check out I May Be Wrong for yourself. You can find a link to purchase the book in the show notes.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast for more deep dives into insightful books.
We're passionate about sharing books that spark conversations and inspire personal growth.
And we love having you join us on this journey.
Thank you for listening to the Book Nook podcast. Don't forget to check the link in the description to get your copy of the book. And until next time, happy reading.
Happy reading.